Hello everyone, this is Val at Better Belief, and today I'd like to talk to you about one of the many ways of saying or motivational quotes that swirl around in the new age sort of spiritual space, which is the urge or the encouragement to follow the path of least resistance. I want to start by saying that many of the most popular spiritual well-being stock phrases that you see being swirled and thrown around often convey messages that I don't particularly agree with, or at least not entirely. So I'm going to start by saying that when it comes to this particular one, I agree with the follow the path of least resistance only 50-50. The first time I heard this sentence was 10 years ago. Forgive my speech, guys, I'm just wearing retainers. So the first time I heard this sentence was 10 years ago as part of a recorded meditation that I was doing every morning to manage some spells of acute anxiety that I used to suffer from at the time. And as you know, meditations often make you do affirmations, which means you repeat the same sentence over and over. And amongst the affirmation being drilled during this particular meditation, there was this one that said, "I follow the path of least resistance." And I remember feeling immediately confused by how that would work in practice, especially as I was working in a professional role where it was often required of me to leverage my influence to get people to do things that they didn't want to do. So now, 10 years down the line, I think I found enough clarity to be able to articulate how I interpret the concept of the path of least resistance and how I apply it to the events of my life. So a bit of context about the meaning of this expression. According to a quick Google search, it looks like it was first heard in physics, so possibly first utilized by Newton to describe different levels of physical resistance to forward motion. Now, I know nothing about physics and I couldn't pin down any information about when the expression transitioned from scientific jargon to be adopted into more common everyday language. So my little etymology adventure ends here. But if somebody who does know is watching this video, please let me know in the comments below. So what did I follow the path of least resistance in my morning meditation mean? The way that I've interpreted it in the last few years is a combination of many meanings, among which are go with the flow, don't go forcing situations, don't become insistent and nagging, don't persistently apply pressure onto a situation over and over when it's not producing the desired result. It's been easier for me to adopt this mindset in the last few years because I've noticed that whatever is the force that moves this world, and I know that many people won't believe this, but I do because of my experience, the force that moves this world has put me in the right place at the right time several times in several key moments of my life, even when the odds of that particular event turning out in my favor were very, very slim. This includes, but is not limited to, my permanent move to here, southwest of England. Worked out perfectly, could very well not have. Actually, the odds were more on the side that I wouldn't have. My job on Recipe coming off, my current job coming to fruition, meeting my current partner, even being at the right place at the right time for a split second to catch my abusive partner being somewhere where they said they wouldn't be. Stuff like that. So this has helped me understand and be okay, accept the fact that if some of the most profound desires that I have now don't seem to be finding a way to get fulfilled right away, there's probably a very good reason for the wait. So now, for example, if there's something that I'd like to do or organize or achieve or drive with other people, or something that I'd like to organize and drive that relies a lot on a number of external factors being favorable, if it just doesn't seem to happen organically, after 2 or 3 attempts, I just stop trying. And I want to clarify from now that this doesn't apply to work. The resistance, the types of resistance from within yourself and the relationship with other people that you find at work have their own particular way of being dealt. So I want to make it clear by now that when I talk about external situations, I do not talk about work. But I do talk about situations that don't depend only on me. So what I do is, after 2 or 3 attempts, if it doesn't seem to come off, I just stop trying. But don't get me wrong, I only apply this approach to situations where a significant amount of external factors or other people's efforts are involved outside of work. For example, one of the main changes that I've wanted to make in the last couple of years is to relocate next to my elderly parents in Italy for about 3 months every year, so that I can be next to them and help and support them through their elderly years. You know, they're getting old, they're getting fragile. So, at least for part of the year, it'd be great to be there. My parents have the opportunity to get some of the buildings refurbished that they own right next to their house for me to go and live in one of them. And given that they're both pensioners, and judging from how much they say they miss me, organizing that should be the first thing on their minds, right? Wrong. My parents have zero interest in creating a space for me to live next to them, but they have plenty of energy and time to keep doing the activities that they've carried out for most of their lives, such as volunteering for local associations, helping other people in the local community, none of which currently involve me because I'm not there. So I could be resentful for that. And also, as I mentioned in previous videos, my dad is a compulsive hoarder, and he and my mum have lived in a state of advanced squalor for a long time. And they show very little interest to change that situation also. So I understand that that's absolutely not personal, and there is really nothing much that I can do about that one either. So I could have started being resentful, go out of my way to make this happen anyway, and then be resentful with them because they weren't helping me. I could have given myself the headache to try and bypass them and talk to local contractors in the area to get the spaces refurbished for me to go and live next to them. But after a couple of times speaking to my parents and getting little to no enthusiasm and no action towards this idea, I said to myself, you know what? No. I am not going to try and manage this very complex and stressful endeavor from abroad when my two parents, who should be the first and the biggest beneficiaries of my relocation and have all the time and the means to do this, show zero initiative in making this happen. They obviously don't miss me or need my help enough, or they don't miss me as much as they say they do, and that's okay. It's not personal. And this, for me, is the path of least resistance. If what I'd like to obtain is down to a number of external factors and other people's willingness, then I'll try to get the ball rolling a couple of times and see what comes back. If nothing comes back, I don't force the situation. So for external resistance, I truly believe that the path of least resistance absolutely is the best method. But when it comes to internal resistance, not so much. It seems to me that there is a risk of many people using the path of least resistance rhetoric as a safe way to withdraw from making the effort they'd have to make to create positive change in their lives. And this, ladies and gentlemen, isn't to do with external resistance, it's to do with internal resistance. It is absolutely 100% necessary to go against some internal resistance to bring about positive change. The explanation for why your brain often works against you, or seems to do so when you are trying to make changes to your habits, really deserves its own video. But for the sake of simplicity, let's just say that many, if not most, if not all, of the paths of least resistance that your brain has created for you were built before you were 8 years old and between the ages of 11 and 13, which are the stages of your life where standing up for yourself may have gotten you punished or reprimanded, or eating an ice cream would have been enough to make everything better. We often, very often, disregard that most of our reactions to circumstances today rely on pathways that are outdated, that we created during childhood and early adolescence, meaning that any habits or reactions that were successful in making us feel safe from painful events or in making us feel special then we use as an imprint to operate on today and for the rest of our lives. And this may include things like shying away from risky situations, even if there may be a good reward at the end of that risk. Avoiding difficult conversation even when we need to set boundaries. Settling for the job we don't like because we're scared of the unknown. Or finding refuge in TV, video games, junk food when life gets difficult. If you're hearing the fireworks behind me, it's because it's the 9th of November and apparently we're still in the week of the fireworks. I hope it doesn't disrupt the video too much. So all of these coping mechanisms that cause us to resist change were created when we were young, because guess what? Back then they probably worked. Or at least they didn't cause any major collateral damage or loss of progress as they do now. So this is why change is difficult. When you're young, the strategies you adopted to deal with difficult and stressful situations became repetitive circuits for your electrical brain connections. They flowed effortlessly because that's what a young brain is supposed to do and is capable of doing. And as the brain gets older, sadly, it gets harder for us to create new circuits. The electrical impulses in your brain will naturally keep flowing along those same available existing circuits that you created as a child or teenager, following, guess what? The path of least resistance. And again, this would be the path that you created when you were 3 or 4 or 12, and I'm sure that 3 or 4 or 12-year-old you was lovely, but probably not the most qualified person to make very important decisions about the 20, 30, 40-year-old version of you that wants a better life. And this is where I don't believe there's any good use for the path of least resistance. After the end of early adolescence, most significant changes only happen through repetition and discipline. This means repetition of actions and habits that don't come naturally to you. The stories that we tell ourselves, like, I know that I should do this differently, but it just doesn't feel right. It's not my thing. It's not my style. I don't want to upset anyone. I tried it once. It's just not for me. Are nothing more than rationalizations of the fact that the pathways in our brain where electricity has flowed effortlessly for years have created a superior idea of your own identity that you're subconsciously afraid to give up. There's nothing inherently wrong with your brain for doing this. We've inherited a brain that has remained pretty much unchanged for several thousands of years. And when this particular human brain appeared in the world was a very different place. So it may well be that in a past time when things didn't change so fast and humans didn't live this long, this strategy of keeping the strong neural pathways created in childhood and adolescence may have been very effective. The dangers and painful experiences you came across as an adult probably weren't that much different from the ones that you came across as a child. But in today's world, things change so much faster. They change constantly. You may grow up in a tiny village and have very little social interactions outside your regional boundaries, and then in your 20s find yourself catapulted living in a city full of opportunities in a completely different culture, country with completely different values. And it doesn't even have to be this drastic a change, but your experience in today's world is likely to be very different from the one of your parents, at least in the Western world. So chances are that the risks and the opportunities and the environment that you're going to find yourself living when you're an adult not only are going to be very different from what they were like when you were a child, but they're also going to be very different from the ones that your parents were experiencing at your age. And your parents may have been laborers or struggling financially or have very strong religious beliefs, all of which made up a specific set of struggles and limitations they more or less inadvertently passed on to you. But you may be a professional in a cyber field with a completely different lifestyle and a completely different set of opportunities, and they may have absorbed their beliefs from their parents, whose world was even more different than that. So the strategies that they use to keep safe and happy may just not work for you. So the fear-based beliefs that you adopted in your early childhood may not be relevant to you as an adult. So this is why dealing with internal resistance, especially after the end of adolescence, is pretty much the only way to make long-term significant changes. You have to repeat the desired behavior enough times to close the pathway of the unwanted behavior that came so naturally to you for so many years, and create a brand new path with the new behavior, so that water first starts shyly trickling down this new path, and little by little you watch it become a waterfall. But especially for the first few weeks, your brain is not going to like this because it's a lot of effort. It's like the difference between going through a motorway or a very well beaten track that you've used for years and going through a tiny jungle pathway that you have to beat down with a machete every step of the way. It's not going to be fun for the first few days or weeks, even though it can be made incredibly easier by doing hypnotherapy. So that's why I agree with the I follow the path of least resistance idea, just 50%, and only when applied to external resistance, but not to do with work. So my conclusion is that the main flaw in the follow the path of least resistance strategy is that it doesn't account for internal resistance as well as it does for external resistance. For external resistance, yeah, go for it. Unless it's work, absolutely valuable method. But when it comes to internal resistance, I completely disregard the path of least resistance and I use two different so-called rules instead. The first one is from the legendary Marissa Peer, and it goes, make the unfamiliar familiar. And the second one is from the wise Loretta Bruning, and it goes, most significant efforts don't produce immediate results. The way that I applied these rules to this particular situation is that I'm not very good at doing YouTube videos. I'm not really used to it. It's a lot of work still. I've got these retainers on and I sound weird. So at the end of a day of work, I'd much rather sit on the sofa and watch true crime drama. But instead, I've decided to sit down 1 hour every day for several days. You wouldn't be able to tell. And work on the content recording and editing of this video until it was ready to share today. So had I followed the path of least resistance and given myself all the good reasons why I probably shouldn't be on YouTube, come on Val, you don't really have the face, your English is a bit weird, this is my negative inner dialogue. You got these retainers in and you sound weird, just stick to what you're good at, which by the way, we're not even sure what that is. Had I given in to all this absolutely effortless inner dialogue, this video wouldn't exist. So I really hope this makes sense and I really hope it helps someone. I'd love to read your comments or questions below this video if you have any. And I wish you a great rest of your day and week. Much love.